service in 1945. It's designed, it gets there a few weeks too late. Something called Operation Sentry. We take the first Centurion tanks to Germany, we test them, and everybody starts liking them. We think this is going to be a really good tank. And coming on now, that's why NATO is formed. And this terrible thought that our tanks compared to some of those tanks we've seen in things like the Berlin Victory Parade, tanks like the Russian heavy JS-2, 3, we know they're building bigger tanks. What are we going to do about that in terms of firepower? Now for the British Centurion, we start with a 17-metre gun. That's the one that was already firing. Weight of solid shot in steel that gun would fire. But there's still a worry. In the early 1950s, we've seen the T-34-85, we've now seen the T-54 tank. We are really worrying, especially Russian heavy tanks. What's going to come along? What size gun? We're going to need a bigger gun to defeat that. That's the thought process that's going on. Why they start a program to get an immense 7.2-inch canister. Let's not have it lobbing shells at a distance. Let's have it as a direct fire weapon that can fire around at a big, heavy fuel. Now this is what they call stage 2 of the project. Stage 1 had an open top. They're trying to work out these rounds for that, a gun that size, 2-part ammunition. Round goes in, followed by the brass cakes with the propellant in. They start by doing it with a loader assist system. It looks a bit like an auto loader. Biggest direct fire weapon ever put on a tank. It was going to fire HESH, high explosive squash head. Plastic explosive basically inside a metal case, pancake on the side of the enemy and causes massive damage inside by the shockwave. Also, in the mid-1950s, we start missile programs of our own, tank missiles. So this MB-4005 basically goes wrong because it's not used in the same way. Still got the threat of those heavy Russian tanks, but what are we going to do about it? So that was one of the British ways of looking at the problem. This is, we're going to see a couple of those in a moment. This one though is a heavy tank to hold a bigger gun to take on those bigger Soviet tanks. They've got the wartime biggest anti-aircraft gun they could get. It can fire a gun to 60 pounds. They end up using that capacity. Again, instead of having to get shelter behind little bombers, level, we're going to fire with enormous force behind it at enemy tanks. So they managed to squeeze that in that M103 turret. Inside, 2 loaders are needed. Again, you've got such big ammunition they're going to be able to fire there. They put it on this new hull. They finished making about 300 of them in about 1954, and they go straight in the shed. They've got so many problems. 98 remedies are needed to get that tank to work properly. Different reasons, sometimes because in the factory they took components from what they were making on the M47 and the M48. Didn't always work. They couldn't keep up with the stresses, the strains. The engine, the first engine put in there underpowered a bit, etc. The one we've got, M102, that's got a later engine put in from the M60 American tank to give it enough welly. The M103 tank, they give them to the American Army, who really don't like them that much. They're so big. They sit on the hillside, they pick you with bigger Russian tanks in the distance, whilst your normal tanks, the M47s, M48s, are in the foreground, the lighter tanks, will that work for them? Army drops something, who picks it up? The US Marines. So it goes over to the American Marine Corps and they keep it in service till about 1976. And R1 here is part of about 150 the American Marine Corps use. R1 is in American Marine Corps colours, and it was given to us many years ago. I think I said this story before. A lot of people come here and said, oh, my dad served in this one, that one, or I served in your tank. This one, the American Marine turned up and he showed us inside where he scratched his name when he was in, he was one of the crew members. We go away and say, our 20-pounder gun on the Centurion's not good enough. We're going to have to get another one. So down at Radi in Kent, they design a new gun. That's the gun that you can see on this Mark 13 here. L7 105mm gun, firing, armour piercing, discarding Sabo ammunition, better than this 120 gun on the M103. Big cast turret, again this idea out to watch out for the bigger Russian tanks. When we put the 105 on the Centurion, we have to take it out of service, no point having it. This gun is so much better. It's 50% better than the 17-pounder in World War II in being able to penetrate armour. So it's got a tank. The Centurion tank was very good anyway, but it's suddenly let forward. Give it, we sell it, the Americans, they put it on their 60 tanks, they put it on the first hit it, they put it on the tanks. It goes all over the place because it's so successful, still in service. So again, one of those things where technology can bring an aging system suddenly it's up to date in that way. And what we're going to see in a moment,
fully restored M47. Always good to see the T72 as well, and of course one of my favourites, the Centurion Mark 13.
I'm just going to keep quiet a while and let's just have a look at some of these amazing bits of kit as they come in and do a couple of circuits for us before we'll have a chance to see each one individually. But as they come in there, there's our Centurion, followed by the Soviet T-55, followed by the M47, AMX-13, the American M60, get your spotter books out there, another Leopard coming off the high, Chieftain, those things go into play, along with maybe we might be able to sell the vehicle as well. If you read all the books, the Chieftain is often described as the first proper main battle tank. And we can talk for hours on definitions, but in other words, at the end of World War II, we were looking at people like Phil Marshall, we wanted a universal tank. Stop talking about infantry tanks. Enormously thick armour and very well angled. The driver in the front, he's lying on his back, supine position they call it. Lower he is means the turret can be lower, and that means you're less of a target to the enemy. That gun doesn't have a traditional man clip. That thing in the front holding it is actually going right into the turret. The same turret is like a needle point. Again, very hard to penetrate. What the Germans built when they're allowed to build a tank again from 1955 onwards. Germany, or I should say, of course, don't forget Germany is divided after the war. West Germany, in 55, the NATO says, look, we really need the resources of Germany to help defend ourselves against the threat. Which is the Leopard 1. Amazingly, some of those German wartime designers, Ferdinand Porsche is part of the team originally. A guy called Niekamp, who's been the German guy, who's been really helpful in HWA, the German procurement agency in World War II. He's part of that team that puts the Leopard together. And the other thing about the Leopard, it becomes quite a success. When that came to the end of its service life, they ended up, the next tank they bought was a Leopard 1 or a Leopard 2, another design feature from that. That particular one, Canadian flag on the back, it was a Canadian Leopard in service, hence a maple leaf on the turret there. Get rid of it that way. Different countries got different ideas on that. And certainly the Soviet Union, their idea was you put it in the store, you have to listen to it. Centurion fleet with the Chieftain. We ultimately do that, although the Centurion ship passed down the line to secondary duties. Some are used till quite late for artillery observation roles, engineer variants, etc. But ultimately we end up trying to... Now there were plenty of countries that were prepared to buy our Chieftains when we got rid of them, and one of the countries that they buy them all and they take them out to Israel. Sometimes they use them as they were. What they tended to do though was improve on them. So again, like other countries that copied that, we've got a Swedish Centurion with a later engine, not the original Meteor with a petrol engine. They put a diesel engine in its place. And that was, the Israelis were first to do that. actual variant of the Centurion in British Army, the sides built up, that would push landing craft off the beach. We replaced that with some German Leopard variant later on with Hippos. But they were still in service about 2003 with it. We've got one in the collection here. So, stunningly effective and brilliant for the UK tank, because as we said, of the 8,000 produced, about half of them were sold around the world. Now, moving off now is one of those tanks that we were worried about. New tanks with frying pan shaped turrets, this rounded turret, but they're still very effective. We have got a straight edge. It's called the T-54 initially. They do another model that they're trying to make proof against nuclear attack. That's a T-55, and it's got a 100mm gun. A nice angled front glacé plate. So again, the idea, you're thickening the armour. 100mm gun, you know, a pretty powerful gun there we're looking at. And the wide British roads, they'll rip up the tarmac, warm day like today. It's what's called aggressive track. It bites into the ground. NATO tanks have to have rubber pads so we don't ruin the road that way. But made in enormous numbers, almost certainly the tank, I think T-3485, T-54, T-55, we're looking at around 100,000 made. And that wasn't just so many westernised, moderner tanks, much more sophisticated than this T-55, using some really old kit like these tanks, but that's still got a 100mm gun on you. And if you're at the receiving end of that gun, you're not that bothered at what generation it comes from, okay? This still works to a degree. We have another issue these days, of course. We have electronics on so many things. If those electronics are jammed, intercepted, power bursts, you know, this thing will still work. This will still have a validity. How many times is that happened in the last 100 years? And that's what the Americans realise. Now, their own tank force, they get some Shermans, they get some AFVs, they rush them to Korea to invade the north. They get M26 Pershings. Some of those are refurbished quickly. They start a new tank program. This one, the M47, coloured for Pershing, new turret on top with a new... It has a lot of faults in it, early days the M47, but it's not in service with the American forces that long. The M48 is a much more thought-through design that takes over quite quickly. But because they've made a number of these, they're very quickly, as part of mutual aid, various other programs, that America is giving hit to those NATO countries recovering after World War II. They're still building up their own industry. In lots of other armies who help subscribe, their names are on the back there of it, to help get this restored. The guy who restored it's driving it round at the moment, which means that's another tank we can show off in our collection. So really grateful for that. I know you can go and have a look at it later on. That M47 tank there. Arab-Pakistan wars, M47 didn't do very well. Next tank go round, they use those as well. France, I mean, all after World War II, desperate to build their own country. So a number of countries were looking to buy tanks especially after 1950 when the Korean War began, they're all looking, when can we buy? And the French have designed a light tank. They wanted it air portable. AMX-13, 13 tons, it creeps up in weight. This one, again, if you look at that little yellow on tanks, little yellow round circle with a number in, that's its upper weight for bridges. So if you're the military policeman, you're waving it forward, if you know this bridge behind me takes 20 tons, that's okay, I can get this one across. I can go a big thermal sleeve down the barrel, but it was an effective bit of kit, especially if you had a country that didn't want or didn't have the road space, etc. for a passive tank. So Switzerland looked at this thinking, oh, it'd be great for our mountain roads. And of course also it was cheap, and that's still attractive to many countries. So sold all over the place. The MX-13 still appearing, still in service for some countries. Lots of upgrade programs went through it. So what's the idea of a muzzle brake? At the end of the barrel, that round piece has got what they call baffles in it. It's got little flat plates. And the idea is, once the round has been fired by the gun, it flies out the end of the barrel with supersonic speed, followed by all those expanding gases from the explosion inside the breech. That's what forced the round out. Now if you capture some of those gases against these baffles, it pulls the gun forward, so it's not recoiling as much. And again, you know, you've got to the point where some muzzle brakes can stop the recoil up to 50%. That's great, because it means, again, space there, you put a bigger gun in, you don't need so much room for that gun to recoil. Most tank crews, if you've got a damaged muzzle brake, you can't fire the gun, because otherwise it will just smash through the rear of the turret. Build another one and just add 2 inches bar and another few millimetres on the gun, sort of thing. And in a way, it was wonderful because it was a young and production that the Americans were doing. Now you can see there, this is where again, all that experience in the Second World War, metal casting, wonderful big steel cast turret on the top, cast hull, boat-shaped, rounded underneath, so if you go over a mine, the mine blast goes up the side and not captured underneath, which can tip you over, that's the worst thing to do. 105mm gun, that British L7 gun that was done for the Centurion, again for around 20 those wheels on the ground, not powered at all, just spreading the weight of the heavy tank out, nice and tense as it goes around. Now on the top, they give it a mini cupola for the commander with a 50 caliber machine gun in there. That can contra-rotate, you can look around at other things from main guns facing the other way. And this particular one was gifted to the museum by the US Army in Europe. Again, tanks like this, US Army first, then on to the Marine Corps. They were still using them in the Gulf War, and then they get sold and passed on all around the world. It's the greatest design. And it's hitting close up, takes it coming out with a new model in the Cold War. And this is one of those classics they came out with. This is the T-72. Very effective with a kick. Now Britain is designing a tank to take over from Chieftain that we saw earlier. In the Gulf War, first Gulf War, against some of the vehicles like this T-72 going around sported by the Iraqi army. T-72, 125mm smoothbore gun.